everybody. Hope you're having a good one or the start of a good one. We're up here in the canyons today in a car that I have known about for a very long time, was around a lot in college, never respected enough, and didn't give it a fair shake. So Alex has come up here today and brought his SVT Contour, which I'm really stoked about. A good friend of mine had one in college. He put a lot of track mods on it. He would do track days and autocross, and I never went with him. I just was like, what is this car? Why are you modifying this front-wheel drive Ford? Which was not fair at all, because that's actually what you're doing with it. So, all right, tell us about this car, about what you've done to it, and what you're doing with it.
Okay. This is a 1999 Ford Contour SVT. The SVT stands for Ford Special Vehicle Team. Basically, this car was not popular in the U.S., so you were already kind of on the same page as everyone else. This is a European model called the Mondio, and they brought it over here thinking that they would be able to replace the Taurus with it. It's a lot smaller than the Taurus, so people didn't want it.
And it kind of replaced the Tempo, which was the old, that was like a generation before, but it was
Yes.
like, here's a unibody compact sedan, and then they can try to make a sporty one.
But part of the problem was its price point made it almost as expensive as the Taurus, because it was a small car with an advanced multi-link suspension in the back.
Yeah.
So, and all-weight discs all the way around, vented in the back even. And so, because of that, it drove the price point up. For example, the SVT in 98, 9, and 2000 was a $25,000 car.
Yeah.
So, back then, I'm pretty sure that was close to a lot of BMW money.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit under the BMWs. Sorry, it was under like an M3. But Car and Driver compared this to a 318 Ti S. And if you think about it today, I mean, even if the car was $25,000 in today's money, this would be more competing with like a Civic Si or
definitely.
a Civic S. Civic Si. But that's not the market they were in at that time.
So, long story short, the SVTs had a differently tuned engine than the normal V6 version. Opened up intake, opened up exhaust, bigger front brakes, stiffer valved struts. The springs were the same,
Okay.
but the struts were stiffer. But lots of people complained that it was still too soft, that it was a very soft ride. So I've addressed that. I have even stiffer struts. I have stronger progressive rate springs. I still have the original sway bars. That's one thing I'll tackle later on. I have larger brakes off of the SVT Focus in the front, and that overall makes the car a much tighter package than it was.
Sweet. One of the complaints on the original one was this tendency to lightly pogo on turns, and it sounds like you have tried to address that with struts and stiffer springs. So let's find out. I'm gonna go up first because we don't want to be stuck behind an escape.
It's still compliant, but it firms up as soon as you load up the suspension.
That's good. That was, granted, I never drove one before, so I'm taking all of this from a review that Car and Driver did, and they did like 10 best handling cars at the time, or no, sorry, 6 best, and this got 5th. It beat an Eagle Talon TSI, and they said, steering's really neutral, it's nicely controlled, but the loading up was a problem. I think it needed a stiffer spring and probably at the time better dampers. We are really spoiled with damper technology now. At the pinnacle of it is the spool valves, made by Multimatic on like the ZL1 and whatnot. But even basic dampers have come so far, and you got to go back in time a bit to go, oh, this is how cars used to drive, and we're not spoiled, but it's just evolution of things. You can look at this dashboard and see evolution everywhere. What manufacturing was available, what kind of tooling, the materials. Like this is actually,
It does
kind
have
of pleatherish.
Yeah, pleatherish is a good word. It's a cheap leather.
Yeah, it's a cheap leather, but nowadays they basically try to do the same thing with soft plastic, because the rest of this is really hard, thin plastic. Mm-hmm. But that's what they could do back then.
Yeah, one of the things you may be noticing is that the engine is very peaky for the size. The camshaft ground that they give this from the factory, actually all the power comes on above 4,500.
Yeah, it's 45 to 67 is kind of your power band. I gotta say, it turns in really easy. It turns in real, like, it's eager but not manic. You know, it's not like a gerbil that found someone's espresso. It's
part of that.
It does settle in really nice.
Part of that is the SVT received a different steering ratio than the standard models. It's a little tighter, but it's still pretty loose. On the track, you are wheeling that wheel all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, these turns are pretty gentle, but I can see you be going a little bit of hand over hand on a tight
Oh yeah,
U-turn.
definitely hand over hand.
It's got a little bit of play in the center, but not much. And then the steering weights up, but it's not really talkative.
No, it's overpowered. It's a variable power steering assist, and it's always a little on the overpowered side. I have a feeling that's going to change when I put an underdrive pulley on this, but I haven't put one on yet.
The cornering feels really neutral though. It feels like the handling is really even, and the grip in the front and the back.
A lot of that
really
is
nice.
The rear suspension. It has multi-link suspension in the back, and one of the parts about that is it has tow control arms in the back. So as you load up the suspension, it tows out. As you unload a side, it tows in. So it gives you a very...
It's like a mechanical rear steer, isn't it?
Basically, it's a mechanical passive rear steer.
Turn around here.
So it remains very neutral. It is hard to upset this vehicle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That is, I don't know, for me, that's my favorite thing about a front-wheel drive car that's set up right is when it feels neutral.
And like if you pin it now, you'll feel a distinct difference between 4 and 5.
Kind of kicked in at 5. I mean, we are at altitude now, so that's definitely not helping an NA motor. But you hear a sound change for sure.
That's
at 45.
Due to a variable intake manifold.
Yeah, so they took the intake from the original Contour and basically like poured and polished it. The pistons have a slightly different metallurgy from what I was reading. You know, different cams. You know, same 2.5 liter V6 as the regular Contour got, but with some of those basic, you know, hot rodding tweaks.
Yep, same crank, same rods. And one of the things for track prepping this thing is you need to change the connecting rod bearings.
Oh.
The original connecting rod bearings are made of a very, very soft metal. And they do not like high revs for long durations.
That's not good. That's, well, E46 has had a rod bearing recall, probably for a different reason, but interesting.
So, believe it or not,
brakes are nice.
Despite, and to me, that's right now, you may like them, but I feel that they are nowhere near where I was.
Right, you were telling me before that you did an endurance track day this weekend, and the pads might be glazed a little bit.
I think they're glazed a lot. Because the initial bite was much stronger before the 39 laps.
Yeah, there's nothing for the first like quarter of the pedal, but the speed I'm going and the amount of braking required, we're going past that amount really quickly, and then right there we're about 3/4 of the pedal down, and I guess the feedback is pretty good.
The feedback is still great. One of the things I'm really considering doing is there is a company that sells a Willwood kit for this, and as I get more aggressive with the track with this, I'll probably switch to that.
Let's see, like the seats have some well, the bolsters are pretty large. I think the material is just slippery because it's like old leatherettes.
Yeah, it's old leather, and on top of that, these seats are. Oh, I also have a Focus ST, not to plug that, but these are much wider. These seats are way wider.
Yeah, these are.
So you actually move around. I think comfort was the first thought with these seats, and holding you in place was, well, it's a sport model, so we should put bolsters on them.
Yeah, they weren't really thought out. It was just let's take the seats that we already have and add some bigger bolsters. have, what, Federal 595s on here?
Yes, 595 RSRRs.
They're nice. They're sticky. Man, the steering is like, it's so weird. There's, I don't know, it's a little effort. Like it's not overpowered to the point of, it's like a spinning wheel at like one of those things that they just bolt to the side of a fence at an amusement park, so a kid thinks he's steering like the whole park, but he doesn't do anything. He just occupies their time while parents like slam a Mai Tai or something. So there's a little more effort than that, and as you get more deeper into the turn, it does, the effort goes up, but it's so strange that you really have there's a disconnect between the front tires and, is it rack and pinion, or is it a
This is a rack and pinion.
Wow.
Granted, it's a rack and pinion unit with 165,000 miles on it.
Okay.
And several track days.
And you got this car for $1,000.
Yep.
Like, this car is 20 years old and it was $1,000. So, well, things are going to shake loose.
I've made sure that yes, you're right. Things are definitely going to shake loose, but I'm very meticulous. After a track day, I put this thing on a lift. I go over all the points. The steering has been something I'm thinking, when is that going to get too tired? But the tie rod ends are tight. I've replaced all the steering components except the actual rack.
Right.
And the only reason I haven't is the only units that are available are Reman units. So,
and those can be a bit of a crapshoot from what I've understood.
Yes, Reman units can either be fantastic, or you bought something that's been very much worn out, just got some new bearings tossed into it.
Yeah.
And
it might not be sealed right. Like, I was looking at those for my car, and some company was sending the steering shaft was actually a different diameter than the original one, and there's so many pieces that go into the system, and if they decide to skimp on one or change one, it affects the entire feel.
And one of the problems I actually ran into when I was rebuilding the brakes is, since the SVT had different brakes than the normal version, the caliper brackets are unique. And I got a set of Reman brake calipers, went to bolt them up, and they don't fit. So I had to actually rebuild my calipers.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's unfortunate. All these parts, it's like baking. Baking is the chemistry of cooking. And if you change one thing, like if you change the amount of flour or water by a little bit, the whole thing falls apart. And like a full steering rack, if you change a couple of seals and save a couple of pennies before you remanufacture it, you could lose the whole thing, or you lose what makes a good steering system magical. Yeah, I mean, so you've changed. Have you changed any of the bushings on this? I know you changed the springs.
I have changed several of the bushings, but not all of them. Okay. There are some bushings in the rear that are very difficult to change. Energy Suspension actually makes a polyurethane insert kit for it. I have that. I am actually going to be doing that with my donor car. I'm going to be taking the whole rear unit out of the donor, doing all the bushings in the back on that, and then install it to this.
And then just swap the rear end. Mm-hmm. That seems like a good idea. Hello, cyclists.
That way, if I'm sitting there pounding away and not having any luck, the vehicle won't be down while I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong.
Yeah, that's a really great reason to have a parts car. I mean, not everyone can have one. Usually buy them to like strip stuff off, but that's a really good thing. That's like when they build a web page offline and then just swap it in the middle of the night so they can test all the functionality beforehand. I mean, the chassis feels really solid.
It's quite a stiff chassis, especially for its age. All you have to do is jack it up from the front and you have both tires off the ground on the side.
Yeah, it feels really good. It's like the only complaints are moving around in the seat and the steering feel. There's a little bit of shudder coming through the wheel, but that's probably something in there that's loose or old. When I downshifted to 2 right there was not a lot of power left above $6,000.
No, it starts to taper off rapidly.
Okay, so it's basically like 45 to 6, and then it's tapering. And
well, what might have happened was when you did that shift, you were off throttle, and the secondaries were probably closed. As I said, it has a variable intake manifold, and it has a little bit of a mind of its own. If you are wide open, it's open.
Okay.
If you're above 4,000 consistently, it's open. But if you're, say, below 4,000, partial throttle, and then stab it down a gear, well, they're closed. And so then the engine's only breathing through half the intake valves.
Gotcha.
Because it's an actual split port intake. Each intake valve has an intake runner.
And what does this thing weigh? I know you've taken the back seats out.
Factory, they're 3,200. This should be right around 2,900 right now.
Wow. It reminds me a little bit of the Fiesta ST, probably because there's a Ford badge on it, but just being able to lift in the middle of a corner and just being able to feel like the weight change for it and the back kind of move out, but not in like a big swing. Mm-hmm. Just having that ability to correct your line a little bit with a front wheel drive car is really fun. This is cool. I think for like a weird track project, like I don't think people think of these anymore. And they might be missing out on something.
That's the funny thing. I get so many thumbs up from people at the track. Every time I've taken it to the track, I always have at least 2-3 people come by. Oh my God, I haven't seen one of these in years.
Right, you forget, you know? Yeah, it's. I don't know. I think they're pretty good looking for the time. Again, with the manufacturing ability we had, you know, this was before like flame surfacing and all that stuff could be done. Everything was pretty round, or it was round or square. Like it was either the Taurus is the example, or this is of like the round shapes they could make, or they could make a perfectly slab-sided like Chevy pickup F-150. It was this or this, but there was no flame surface, aggressive angles anywhere. Mm-hmm. So for the time, I mean, it's a nice size. It's definitely roomier than.
It's a lot less. It's a lot more cozy once you have the rear end.
Yeah, I guess
for example, with the seating position we have, the occupants in the back should be small.
They have no legs really. Yeah, that's kind of funny. It looks like there's tons of space, and then as soon as they turn around, I was like, oh, this is basically a coupe.
And as a final thing, I don't know if you want this part on your video. If people are thinking about this, they are mechanical nightmares.
Okay. No, we want that in the video.
These are mechanical nightmares. Anything to work on the engine involves pulling the intake manifold.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't look like there was a lot of room in there.
No, you want to change the spark plugs? Pull the intake manifold.
Oh my God.
You want to get to the starter? Pull the intake manifold. You want to get to the alternator? Pull the intake manifold. Pull the exhaust manifold on the back. Pulling the exhaust manifold on the back is about a 4-hour job.
Okay, that sounds kind of terrible, I gotta be honest. It seems like I'd rather get a Civic from the 90s if I need a front-wheel drive fun car.
It is a lesson in masochism.
Yeah.
If the correct way, according to the workshop manuals, are to drop the engine assembly. There are
That's a great PR way to say pull the engine. Just drop the engine assembly.
Yes.
Like, you mean the engine?
There are 4 bolts holding the entire front subframe to the chassis. And they're very heavy. They're very robust. It's not going to just come off on its own. But what you're supposed to do is put this on a lift, unhook all the wires in the engine bay, undo those 4 bolts, and drop the entire front cross member. Then you can work on the engine all you want.
That's ridiculous. That's way too hard. I mean,
just changing the serpentine
just
belt.
know that, everyone. If you're looking at this going, that's kind of cool. Know what you're getting. Well, and we'll end on this. How has the reliability been? You know, it's one thing if you have to drop the engine. That's like changing the alternator in an Audi 4.2 or like the W12. Do you have to do a lot of work? Have you had to pull the intake manifold a lot?
Considering, yes, I had. Well, only because of my mistake. I wanted to clean up the entire intake passage because they're known for carving up the backside of intake valves like direct injection engines do, because half the intake valves have no injector on them. And so I did that. I put remanufactured injectors in, and I wish I didn't, because immediately the next day one got stuck open, and I was blowing a bunch of smoke. I thought I blew the engine.
Oh my God.
Did a compression check, did a fuel pressure test, found out I had an injector stuck on. So to get to the injector, you have to pull the intake manifold.
How fast can you pull an intake manifold now?
I've done this so many times. I can get the whole intake on and off in about 20 minutes.
How long did it take you the first time?
I took my time. I did a lot of reading. I spent 4 hours.
Wow. Yeah, that's That's most of the time of doing something the first time goes into reading how to do it, and then like look, and then do the thing, and then look, and then do the thing.
But overall, in all actuality, considering how I'm abusing this thing on the track, I have no added cooling system in it yet. Just the factory oil cooler.
And you were at Willow
I was at Willow this
how
weekend.
hot was it?
It was probably low 90s.
Yeah, low 90s with a stock cooling system, and you did 49 laps straight.
39 laps.
39 laps straight. That's pretty surprising and impressive. If it held temp and everything, that is impressive.
It was an endurance event. I finished 4th in laps, but I was 3rd slowest for the whole day on lap time, because we're talking Corvettes, 1LE Camaros, Mustang GTs with the performance package.
But they all had to pull in and cool down?
Most newer vehicles. Everyone kept pulling in to cool down or taking breaks, and there was just 3 other people who were as bound and determined as I was, and they finished more laps.
If any of you out there are going to go track your car a lot, there's a good video you should watch by Savage Geese, who's on our podcast, about the myths of performance cars. And the one that stuck with me is that they can't do endless laps in the heat. It doesn't matter if it's an M3 or an M2 or even a GT3. Like, that one may hold up better, but there's some basic things that could get too hot, because whether it's they get too hot, or maybe if you're slamming curbs, the bushings aren't set up to take it, or the dampers aren't set up to take it. You should go watch that video before you go out in your new performance-oriented car thinking that you can race it for 3 hours straight and nothing will go wrong. Because something will probably go wrong, and then you'll go, what the hell? Like, I bought the Performance Pack 2, or I bought this or this thing, and it's like they need a lot more. Even the Performance Pack 2 doesn't come with a diff cooler. And Ford is like, if you want a diff cooler, you should get the GT350. So just, you got to keep an eye on that stuff. So if this was able to go that many laps in 90-degree heat with no problem, that's impressive. Well, thank you for bringing it up, man.
Thank you for taking the time.
It was nice to finally drive this. My friend, shout out to Chris King, who had a black Contour SVT in college and did all kinds of mods, and it looked good, but I didn't know what he was doing or what it felt like to drive. So this was a great representation of the 90s, you know, a lot of round shapes, hard plastic, pleatherette. Chassis feels great. It seems like a good platform for a performance car.
Do you agree with, now, you haven't had the chance to drive a factory one, but do you think the suspension is too soft?
No. Actually, wait, I'll take it back. It doesn't pogo the way I expected. It seems like once it's set in the corner, it stays there. And that was a complaint of the factory, is that it would set and then kind of move around a little bit. This seems fine, but I think you could do with some sway bars.
Oh yeah.
Because it definitely just
it's on the
leans
list.
and sets and leans and sets. And I don't know, maybe if there's maybe a smaller steering wheel, or I hate to say like a remanufactured rack, because it's just.
Oh yeah, no,
you're
I'm on the same page. It's on the list. This is just one thing at a time.
Yeah, good. That's what you do. Do it slow. Do it right. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks again. Thank you guys for watching. New one takes every week. Me and Matt switching off, sometimes doubling up. We don't know. It depends on the cars. Check out the podcast, and if you want to support us, buy some shirts. It helps us a ton. It helps us pay for the gas to come up and do things like this and teach you about cars like the Contour. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.